Welcome back to the Oscar Project Podcast, the show where I discuss Oscar-nominated films year by year. I am your host, Jonathan Eacherberg, and today I'm bringing you an interview with Hannah Rafkin, director of the short film Keeper, Gold Medal recipient for documentary at the 2024 Student Academy Awards. Before I jump into the interview, please be sure to subscribe to the show in your podcast player so you can get all the newest episodes as soon as they are released. If you like the interview and want to hear more, please consider leaving a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Hannah Rafkin is a director and documentary filmmaker whose two previous films, Crush Icebergs and The Clockmaker, have both screened at Doc NYC. In 2023, she completed her MFA in social documentary at the School of Visual Arts in New York City, and she joins me today to talk about her most recent short film, Keeper, which recently won the Gold Award for the documentary category of the 2024 Student Academy Awards. Hannah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So your film focuses on Flynn, a single father in the Bronx who uses beekeeping as a source of calm despite being allergic to bees. Where did you first learn about Flynn, and what drew you to wanting to make a film about his story?
So this film began as a short film assignment in grad school. It was meant to be about a 5-minute profile on an interesting person in New York City. And I had lived in Maine for 7 years before moving to New York to start grad school, and was fascinated within that comparison of Maine and New York, and fascinated by the ways that New Yorkers find unlikely, unusual, kind of wild ways to maintain a connection to nature in the city.
Sure.
I always found beekeeping really fascinating. And so I looked into New York City beekeepers, found an article that profiled several beekeepers, and Flynn was one of them. It listed that he was allergic to bees, kept them in his daughter's childhood bedroom, explained about his honey business, and I was pretty intrigued and reached out to him thinking we were going to have kind of a 5-minute Zoom call. Are you interested? And we ended up talking for a couple of hours. And from there,
Oh, wow.
I kind of knew that we were off to the races.
That's crazy. Yeah, always when you hit it off that well right at the beginning, that makes it a lot easier, I would imagine.
Definitely. And, you know, the first day that we spent together, we were doing a polar plunge together in February.
Oh, wow.
So it was that was a good indication of kind of the pace of things and the
Sure.
energy. But everything really changed throughout the process of making this film. And even long before he was sick, I was pretty positive that I wanted to turn it into my thesis film, and that this story couldn't be contained in 5 minutes. And I was getting some pushback about the lack of drama and stakes in the story. And Flynn was at that point really, excited about continuing. And right before my final thesis pitch, in which I had to defend making this film because how was I going to make a film without any stakes? That is when he called me to tell me some drama to share, which was that he had been diagnosed with throat cancer, and said that he wanted to continue filming.
That's incredible, and power to him for wanting to continue with that. Obviously, like you said, the film kind of starts off focusing on the beekeeping world in New York City, and then you drop that bomb kind of in the middle there, and you were invited to go to some of his doctor's appointments that you show in the film. You even got to go to a wedding that he went to with his family. So there had to have been a lot of trust there. And how did you go about building that trust with him and with his daughters, his family as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think from the first months of filming, Flynn and I developed a really close bond, and there were a lot of conversations and moments that we had without the camera, talking about our lives and connecting. And so it was really important to me to check in throughout the process with him, even long before the cancer news, just to ensure that this was still feeling mutually good and feeling like that we were both mutually invested in doing this. Yeah, so we had become really close when he got this news, and I had met his family and Alora several times at this point. And then things really, really shifted and changed and intensified when he got sick. And, he began wanting to maintain his boundless energy and not slow down whatsoever. And so that was sort of normal for a while, tagging along with him and Alora on their beekeeping activities. And And then, when he got really, really sick and was kind of unable to be himself in many ways, I think that's really where I was feeling that depth and trust of our relationship. I mean, I was spending a lot of time just with Alora because he would be sleeping all day and not filming. We would watch movies, talk about her love life, and kind of find some distraction from all of the pain that was happening.
Yeah.
But I mean, this was shot as a one-woman band, and so I would never have traded that for the world. I think establishing that dynamic of me and my presence in their lives was something I approached very thoughtfully, carefully, and I've certainly made missteps, but that's something that bringing in somebody to hold a boom over his head while he is convalescing was never in the equation. So yeah.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And I really like how you say Flynn's boundless energy. He really comes across very authentic with that energy throughout the film, and you can see when he doesn't have it and he can't maintain that it really kind of hurts him personally. But he's always got that uplifting. He's giving his daughter career advice, life advice, even when he's laying in the bed, almost can't speak. So it's really good to see that, and then to see him at the awards with you, with his daughter, just last week was amazing. And I understand he's doing much better now. Is there anything else that about him specifically that you wanted to touch on that you weren't able to include in the film?
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to see that moment and see, the beauty of him. He's returned to his energetic self. Yeah, I mean, there was so much that didn't make it into this film. I had about 70 hours of footage. There's so many fascinating elements about Flynn and his life and his childhood, his relationship with his late sister, which was alluded to in the wedding scene. They're archery instructors, Flynn and Alora. There's so many fascinating elements to his life, but even within our experience, there was so much that didn't make it in. We went on a road trip, drove through the night from New York to St. Louis, stayed over one night and drove right back and drove through the night again for a play that was about a beekeeper. That was a very important and memorable moment in my life and within the experience of the project, but ultimately didn't have any relevance for or a place within a 39-minute film. So it was a cool lesson in sort of just like, it's very difficult to edit your own material. Like there were times that I felt like I was perhaps too close to it. I knew too much to be an objective viewer while watching back. So that's where a lot of feedback from my SVA professors and classmates came in handy. And, I also learned that because I will always have more footage than I can use. And, within the trust conversation that we were having, there was a day I lost a full day of footage due to a faulty SD card. That was a really important day. And I was kind of like, okay, well, shit, what am I going to do here? Like this is key material. And ultimately, I managed and I didn't miss it while I was editing it. And so it was a nice lesson too in kind of dismantling this kind of scarcity mindset of I need everything or I'm screwed. It's much more important, I learned, to be present and kind of just at peace with.
Sure.
If the trust is there, if the story is moving, I'm there, it will work out and I will figure out how to arrange it. So there were several lessons in the things that did not make it in, but of course there's plenty of things that I wish could have been part of it.
Absolutely. And at the awards, Flynn was able to speak for just a moment, and he joked that the hardest thing about doing the film from his perspective was training all of the bees not to attack you. What was it like filming in and around all those bees? And I imagine that you got stung at least a few times throughout the course of filming with the bees and beekeepers.
That was definitely a classic Flynn joke. I did get stung. I got stung on a skyscraper rooftop on my head while they were installing hives in Midtown. And I was trying to keep the camera still. I was getting what has, I think, become like one of my favorite shots in the film, where he's on the rooftop shaking a hive quite violently, or shaking a box of bees into a hive with skyscrapers behind him. I was trying to keep the camera steady as I felt a bee crawling in my hair. And I was thinking to myself, okay, they can probably smell fear. I'm not afraid. They don't want to hurt me. This is fine. It's just crawling about in my hair. And it stung me, and I had to call Flynn over to scrape the stinger out of my scalp. So after that point in time, whenever I was offered the beekeeping veil and garb, I always just said yes. At first, I was like, this is going to interfere. And then I was like, you know what? I can't be thinking about getting stung while I'm trying to frame a shot and hold the camera steady.
Sure. The joys of being the only one who can do all of that stuff. When I first started watching the film, there's two things that really struck me right away. Both were related to sound. First, you begin the sound with basically the only sound being that of the buzzing bees, and then it kind of slowly transitions almost into the buzzing sound of New York City and the life in the big city. What was kind of the thought process towards setting up the sound in that way right at the beginning of the film?
Yeah, I appreciate that you picked that up. I think one of the goals that I had in the edit was establishing this very deep, philosophical, intimate connection that Flynn has to the bees. He describes the beehives as boxes of Zen for him, and sort of an escape from the buzz and the noise and the chaos of the city and of his life. So I wanted to establish that when he's inside of the hive, he's really with those bees. And, as his health waned, the health of the bees waned too. And so linking those elements with sound was a way I wanted to kind of get that across. When there was the scene with the wax moths in the bee room where he goes and attacks these parasites that have come into the hives. Yeah. Within that scene, it was sort of like, there's a link there between the wax moths are an invasion trying to kill the bees. There's a parallel there to the cancer. And then that scene, he's really fighting quite violently. He's attacking these moths and really fighting to get them out and to save the hives. And that kind of mirrored to me the violence of the chemo and the radiation that was saving him, but in quite a brutal way. So, and, as he had to step away more and more from the bees, those sounds kind of dissipate a little bit. And I definitely used as much as I could out of freesound.org's bee sound library up until I was able to get it professionally mixed. But yeah.
Very nice. And the other sound element that I wanted to talk about is the music. There's good variety. I heard some hip hop, some slower, calmer music. Again, how did you pick the music for the film? And also how did you kind of align it to that other sounds of the city and the bees and all the other things that we were just talking about?
Yeah, this was probably one of the more fun elements of editing this film, was working with the music. I actually found all of the songs on YouTube Audio Library, which is all free and royalty-free music that artists have uploaded, which turned out to be a goldmine. And the artist that I used the most is an artist named Patches. And so I found a song or two of theirs that I thought kind of hit a particular emotional chord, and then looked at the artist's other songs and found a variety that kind of had a sonic through line, but really elicited different feelings and emotions. And I kind of labeled them as uplifting, plucky, eerie, mournful, and kind of wove them in to various scenes as felt fitting for the material.
That's fantastic. And of course, I mentioned it at the top and want to congratulate you for being the gold medal winner for the documentary category at this year's Student Academy Awards.
Thank you.
That being said, what was your favorite or most memorable part of the awards and the events in London last week that you participated in?
Yeah, it was an incredible week, and having Flynn and Alora out there celebrating with me made it just totally unforgettable. Having them come up on stage with me to accept the award and say their piece. I mean, we were all making each other cry up there. I certainly will not ever forget that. and there is now video footage of it. But I think the most, literally indelible memory is that Flynn, Alora, and I, the day before the ceremony, went out to get matching bee tattoos. So that
that's awesome.
will be on my body forever, and in my mind and heart forever, and my arm.
That's incredible. Definitely. And are there any festivals or other screenings coming up where people can check out the film if they're interested?
Yes. So the Doc NYC premiere, which is also our world premiere, is on November 13th. There's another screening on the 15th of November as well. And I'm currently planning a screening series that's going to double as a Oscar shortlist campaign and kind of impact campaign, collaborating with Flynn and his honey company, various community organizations and partners, and venues around the city. So more to come on that.
Excellent. Well, I do have a couple of questions not specifically related to the film, but before I move on to those, is there anything else you want to touch on about Keeper?
Oh, man. Wow. You know what? I think I covered a lot of ground.
Sounds good. This might be the hardest question I ask, but if you had to pick your top 3 films of all time, what would they be?
Yeah, this is such a brutal question. I can't believe that you do this to people, but hey, someone's got to ask the hard questions. I'm going to sort of sidestep it by saying 3 documentaries that I love.
Sure, go for it.
Which are All That Breathes by Sean Sen, Mayor by David Ossett, and Hail Satan by Penny Lane.
Excellent. Good films. And if you could invite any 3 movie characters to your next dinner party, who would they be and why? Okay,
I want to get Dickie Greenleaf, Tom Ripley, and Freddie Myers at a dinner table. And then I want to throw in RuPaul as the gay conversion camp counselor from But I'm a Cheerleader. And then I want to sit back, ask some provocative questions, and see what happens.
Just watch the chaos unfold.
Absolutely.
And do you have any books that you could recommend that you've read recently? They could be fiction or nonfiction and don't necessarily have to be related to movies at all.
Yeah. A book that I read sort of in the process of this film that I found pretty interesting is called The Bees by Laline Paull. And it's told from the perspective of a worker bee. And it's sort of a dystopian thriller about caste and class and societal division. And it's a fun read that was relevant for obvious reasons. I'm reading a book of essays right now called How Far the Light Reaches by Sabrina Imbler, it's a series of personal essays about race and queerness and gender that are interwoven with really fascinating descriptions of bizarre sea creatures. I'm finding it quite inventive and fun. And I really love graphic memoir and graphic nonfiction. I think it's a really cool approach to nonfiction storytelling with creative visuals that can be really immersive and inventive. So that's something I always gravitate toward. And the most recent one that I read was Can't We Talk About Something More Pleasant by Roz Chast, which is about grappling with aging and death of parents in the way that we do and do not talk about death.
Excellent. We'll put some links to each of those in the show notes so people can check them out if they've never read them before.
Awesome.
And lastly, before we wrap up here, do you have any other projects lined up that you're working on? And also, where can people follow you on social media to keep tabs on what you're up to?
Yeah, I've got some project ideas in the works. As I mentioned, I lived in Maine for 7 years, and I'm working on some ideas around a film about the lobster industry there and how it's changing as a reflection of how Maine is changing and the country is changing. That is in the sort of brainstorming and development phase. I've got some other ideas for shorts as well, but I'm certainly focused on making the most of this moment with Keeper. And social media, I am on Instagram at Hannah Rafkin, and then there's a Instagram for the documentary at Keeper Doc.
Wonderful. We'll put some links to those as well so people can give you a follow. Well, Hannah, thank you so much for taking the time today and for sharing your film and Flynn's story with me. Really appreciate hearing all about the film.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I just want to put a plug out there as well for at Boogie Down Bronx Honey, which is Flynn's business Instagram, which is a great follow as well. And at Alora Flynn.
Excellent. We'll link to that as well for them as well.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you again to my guest today, Hannah Rafkin. Her short film, Keeper, won the Gold Award in the documentary category at the 2024 Student Academy Awards. The Oscar Project podcast is written and produced by me, Jonathan Eacherberg, with editing assistance from Joshua Eacherberg. If you want more movie coverage, check out the Oscar Project on Substack at theoscarproject.substack.com, and be sure to come back for my next episode, where I will be speaking with Rishabh Raj Jain, director of the short film A Dream Called Kushi, Happiness. Until then, I hope to see you at the movies.